Well, if you know me, you know I spend a lot of time in front of this wall, bouncing around, looking at the economic data, looking at the graphs, getting quite excited by them. But I'm afraid the graphs that we have here for COVID-19 are deeply depressing, some of the most depressing I've ever seen. And let me explain why. The news is ultimately quite bad. And you might not have got that from looking at the COVID-19 cases. We had this from Public Health England today. It was in the press conference, and it looked like there was something of a plateauing. But the key thing is cases don't necessarily give you the best indication of what's going on underneath the surface, given that we are only testing so many people here in the UK. You get a better sense of where the UK stands in comparison with other countries by looking at the number of people dying from COVID-19. And that picture, well, looking at this chart, which just shows you the sheer cumulative number of deaths in various different countries around the world, you might not have got a sense that the UK has much of a problem. It's here quite low down compared with Spain and Italy. But what we need to do is not look at absolute numbers, which this is doing, but at growth rates, something called a logarithmic chart. So we'll take exactly that data, change the axis so we're looking at growth rates rather than the absolute numbers. And look, it's a very different story indeed. Actually, the UK on this kind of line here. And I want to just show you the UK and Italy, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here, because things have evolved a bit over the course of the last few days. So initially, the first 8 days, and we're starting here after the 100th death, the first 8 days after that, it took Italy 8 days to get to 1,000 deaths. So from 100 to 1,000 took Italy 8 days, a 33% every day daily increase in deaths. In the UK, for those first 8 days, actually, the growth was lower. The growth rate in the number of deaths was lower. And so by 8 days, the UK was only up to 578. So a good news story. The UK's line was flatter. Everyone's talking about flattening those curves. The UK's line was indeed flatter. Then the Italian line started to flatten. So over the next 6 days, in Italy, there were 20% daily increases in deaths. But look at what happens at the UK line. Slightly steeper, in fact, 27% growth increase. And that's where we are now. So we've got 2,352 cumulative deaths in UK hospitals. That's just in hospitals. There are some question marks over whether the number should be bigger than that. And you can see these lines are starting to converge, and that's the worrying thing, is the UK death lines are basically converging on Italy. And the worry is, so there's Italy right now. The worry is if the UK carries on growing as it is at the moment, 27% growth in the number of people dying, then you are up to 10,000 deaths basically within a week. Now, that's a depressing number. It suggests the UK might well be heading to get above the Italian line. That's why people are talking about flattening these lines. And behind every one of these statistics is a family, many friends who have lost a loved one. It is very depressing stuff, but unfortunately that is what the data is suggesting. The hope for number 10 is that they can flatten those lines and ensure that the UK number of deaths get down. But at the moment, the omens don't look particularly promising.